The night of my engagement was supposed to be the happiest night of my life. Everyone said so. The fairy lights were warm and golden. The white roses looked soft under the glass ceiling. The live band played quiet music near the garden doors. My mother had tears in her eyes before the guests had even finished sitting down. My younger cousin kept taking pictures of me from every angle, as if she was afraid I would disappear if she stopped. And Ethan stood beside me, in a dark blue suit, smiling at all the right people. If someone had looked at us from across the room, they would have said we were perfect. He was handsome, calm, polite, successful. I was the woman who had loved him for 4 years and said yes when he asked me to marry him under the old oak tree in my grandmother's yard. Our families knew each other. Our friends loved us together. Even the venue felt like a symbol of our future, because I had designed every part of that evening myself. I was an event designer. I built beautiful moments for a living. That night, I had built my own. I should have known that beautiful things can still break. The guests were laughing softly over champagne when the doors at the back of the hall opened. I looked up because the cold air from outside moved through the room in a thin wave. A woman stepped inside holding a small silver purse and wearing a simple black dress. I knew her before Ethan said her name. Lena, his first love, the one he had once described as young, intense, impossible to forget. The one he told me had been in his past. The one he said no longer mattered. For a second, the whole room stayed normal. The band kept playing. A server passed by with glasses on a tray. My aunt leaned over to whisper something to my mother. Then Ethan's hand slipped out of mine. That small movement told me more than any words could. He did not look at me first. He looked at her. Not with surprise, not with discomfort, not even with anger. He looked at her the way people look at a place they thought they had lost forever. I felt something inside me go still. Lena walked toward us slowly. She was pale, but she held herself with the confidence of someone who believed she still had the right to be there. "Then," she said softly. He said her name, like he had been holding it in his chest all this time. "Lena." I did not interrupt. I did not ask what she was doing there. I did not create a scene. Because in that moment, I was no longer confused. I was simply watching the truth arrive. My best friend, Mara, who stood near the flowers, looked at me sharply. She had met Lena only once in a photograph, but even from across the room, she understood enough to move one step closer in case I needed her. I still remember the exact sound in the room then. Not the music, not the voices, just the silence under everything. The kind of silence people make when they are trying not to stare at someone's pain. Lena took a breath and said, "I know I should not be here, but I had to come. I had to tell you before you did something you couldn't take back." A few guests turned. Ethan ran a hand over his jaw. "Lena," she looked at him with wet eyes. "I made a mistake. Leaving you was the biggest mistake of my life." That was the moment my mother stood up. Not fully, just halfway, as if her body wanted to stop what was happening before her mind had caught up. I looked at Ethan. He still had not looked at me. I had spent 4 years learning his moods. I knew the way his shoulders lifted when he was nervous. I knew the slight line that appeared beside his mouth when he was trying to avoid conflict. I knew the look in his eyes when he had already made a decision but was afraid to speak. He had that look now. Finally, he turned toward me. His face was full of shame, and worse than shame, It was full of certainty. "Ava," he said quietly. That was all. Just my name. Like he expected one word to carry all the damage he was about to do. I felt my heartbeat slow. It was strange. I thought I would panic. I thought I would cry. But all I felt was a cold, clean understanding. "You should say it clearly," I told him. The room became so silent that even the band stopped. Ethan swallowed hard. "I never thought she would come back." No one moved. I held his gaze. "That is not an answer." His voice broke. "A part of me still loves her." There it was, open, public, cruel in its honesty. My engagement party became the place where my fiancé chose another woman while I stood beside him in white. Someone near the back gasped. My cousin lowered her phone. My father's face turned a color I had never seen before. Lena started crying. Ethan took one step toward her. That step told me everything. Not just that he loved her, not just that he wanted her. It told me that if I stayed, if I begged, if I fought for him in front of these people, I would only be fighting for a man who was already leaving. And I loved myself too much to do that. So I smiled. Not because I was fine, not because I forgave him. I smiled because I would not give him the image of me breaking open in front of the room he had just used to humiliate me. I reached down, slid my engagement ring off my finger, and placed it on the table beside the champagne tower. Then I picked up the microphone that had been prepared for our couple's toast. My hand did not shake. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I said. My voice was calm enough to shock even me. "It seems the evening has changed a little, so before the rumors begin, let me save everyone the trouble." No one breathed. I looked at Ethan once, then at Lena, then back at the room. "My fiancé has decided he is still in love with someone else. I believe that means this engagement is over." There were a few broken sounds in the room. My mother covered her mouth. Mara started moving toward me again. My father stood fully this time, jaw tight, ready to destroy someone. But I was not finished. "I hope," I said, still holding the microphone, "that anyone who leaves one woman in front of 200 guests for the memory of another at least has the courage to live with that choice." Then I put the microphone down, and I walked out. No screaming, no collapse, no dramatic final look. Just heels against polished floor, then stone steps, then cool night air. Behind me, I heard my mother call my name. Ahead of me, I saw the fountain lights shaking in the dark. Mara caught up with me just before I reached the parking area. She grabbed my arm gently, turning me toward her. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Ava." The first tear fell then. Just one. I laughed once, a dry, broken laugh. I spent 6 months planning this event. She pulled me into her arms. "Forget the event." "I chose the candles myself," I said, and then I started crying for real. Not because I lost the party, because I lost the future I had built in my mind. I did not go home that night. Mara took me to her apartment. She gave me one of her old t-shirts and washed off my makeup while I sat on the bathroom counter like a child who had forgotten how to move on her own. She did not ask for details. She did not tell me to be strong. She did not say Ethan was an idiot, even though he was. She only said, "You can sleep. We will deal with tomorrow. Tomorrow came with too many messages. My phone lit up all morning. My mother, my father, my cousins, clients, old friends, people I barely knew. 2 women from my networking group. An aunt from Arizona who somehow found out before sunrise. I even had one message from a florist I had worked with once, saying she was so sorry to hear about everything. News travels fast when pain is entertaining. There were also 11 missed calls from Ethan. I did not listen to the voicemail until evening. His voice was low and rough. "Ava, please, please talk to me. I know what I did was unforgivable. I did not know she would come. I did not know what I felt until I saw her. I'm not asking you to understand right now. I just need to explain." I deleted it before the message finished. Explain what? That he needed to publicly destroy me before he could be honest with himself? That my humiliation had helped him find emotional clarity? That my engagement party had become his moment of personal growth? No, I did not owe him the comfort of an explanation. By the third day, the story had spread far enough that strangers online were discussing me as if I were a fictional woman in a dramatic series. One video clip from a guest's phone had reached social media. It showed only the end. Me with the microphone saying the engagement was over, then walking out while people stared. Someone had written under it, "She handled this like a queen." I hated that word. People love dignity when it belongs to someone else. They do not see the cost of it after the lights go out. For the first week, I could barely eat. Every room reminded me of him. Every plan reminded me of him. The guest list, the honeymoon folder, the sample invitations, the half-finished seating map I had saved on my laptop under the file name final underscore. Final underscore, real final. Everything felt cruel. I was still living in the apartment Ethan and I had chosen together, but I could not breathe in it anymore. His coat was still on the chair near the door. His coffee mug was still in the dish rack. A book he had been reading sat open on the nightstand, as if he had just left for work and might return any minute. I packed 2 bags and went to my grandmother's old house by the lake. It had been empty for almost a year since she passed away. The house was small, a little worn, and too quiet, but it was mine, in a way my apartment never had been. My grandmother had left it to me with a note tucked into the will. "For when life changes shape," the note said. At the time, I thought it was sweet. Now it felt like rescue. The first night there, I sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket and watched the water turn dark. My phone buzzed again. "Ethan." I let it ring out. Then a message came in. "Please, just tell me you're okay." I stared at the screen for a long time before turning the phone face down. It was a strange thing, realizing someone could care whether you were okay and still be the person who hurt you most. That was the hardest part. Not all heartbreak is caused by monsters. Sometimes it is caused by weak people, and weak people can look very gentle when they are sorry. 2 weeks after the engagement, I learned something else that hurt almost as much. I had spent the past 3 years helping Ethan shape a dream project with his family's company. They owned several old properties across the state, and one of them was a historic hotel near the coast. Ethan wanted to turn it into a boutique destination for weddings and retreats. I had helped design the concept, map the guest experience, contact local artisans, build presentation decks, and create mood boards for the investors. I believed it would become our shared future. I had not signed ownership papers because we were engaged, because we trusted each other, because I was stupid in the particular way women in love are often stupid. I thought emotional partnership meant practical safety. Then Mara called me one afternoon and said, "I need you not to panic. I hate when you start like that. She exhaled. I saw Ethan's company presentation online. They're moving forward with the Coastal Hotel pitch. I sat up straight on the porch swing. What? They're using your design language, Ava. My chest tightened. What do you mean? I mean the exact emotional branding you built, the storytelling layout, the seasonal event structure, even the line about places that hold memory with grace. That's yours. I stood up so fast the swing hit the railing. For a few seconds I could not speak, then I laughed. But there was no humor in it. Of course, I said. Of course. Mara came over that evening with printed screenshots. She laid them across my grandmother's kitchen table while I stared down at pieces of my own work wearing someone else's name. It was all there, not word for word. Ethan was too careful for that. But it was my thinking, my vision, my labor, my fingerprints, 3 years of unpaid strategy hidden inside his polished pitch. I wanted to call him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask whether humiliating me publicly had not been enough, whether he now needed to build his success out of what I had made while loving him. Instead, I called a lawyer. Her name was Nina Patel. She was sharp, calm, and impossible to intimidate. Mara knew her from a nonprofit board. Nina reviewed the files, the emails, my drafts, my timestamps, my original concepts. Then she leaned back in her chair and said, "Good news." I looked at her blankly. She tapped the folders. "You kept everything. I'm an event designer. I keep 17 versions of one napkin placement. Then that habit just became your best friend." Over the next 10 days, Nina helped me send a formal notice to Ethan's company. Not emotional, not messy, not revenge, just facts. Intellectual contribution, documented authorship, use without consent, immediate withdrawal of my materials and language from any future investor presentation. The response came quickly, not from the company lawyer, from Ethan. He showed up at the lake house without warning, standing at the bottom of the porch steps with his hands shoved into his coat pockets and guilt all over his face. I had been painting the old porch railing white. I still had a brush in my hand when I saw his car. For 1 weak second, my heart reacted before my mind did. That is the humiliating part of loving someone deeply. Your body remembers them even after your dignity does. He looked thinner, tired, like sleep had stopped being simple. "Ava," he said. I did not invite him up. "You should leave." "I just want to talk." "You already talked at our engagement." Pain moved across his face. "I deserve that." "Yes." He glanced toward the lake, then back at me. "I did not know my father's team would keep using your material." "That is a lie." His jaw tightened. "I knew they might use some of it. I didn't realize how much." I stared at him. That was almost worse, because it meant he knew enough to stop it and chose not to. He took a step forward. "Lena and it's not what you think." I laughed once, unable to stop myself. "You left me in front of everyone." "I know." "You reached for her while I was still standing there." "Ava, you do not get to tell me I misunderstood." He closed his eyes briefly. "You're right." The wind moved through the trees behind him. Somewhere down by the water, a bird made a sharp sound and flew off. He looked at the paintbrush in my hand. "Are you living here now?" "For now." He nodded like he had lost the right to ask more. Then he said, "I signed the paper. The company will remove everything that came from you." That should have happened without a legal notice. "I know." I was beginning to hate those two words. I know, men say them when they want credit for understanding pain after causing it. He ran a hand through his hair. I am sorry. I set the brush down slowly. Do you want forgiveness, Ethan, or do you just want to feel less ashamed? That landed hard. I could see it. He did not answer for a moment. Then he said very quietly, maybe both. For some reason, that honesty made me angrier than another lie would have. I crossed my arms and looked at him fully. Then let me save us both time. I do not forgive you, and you are allowed to feel ashamed. He looked like he wanted to say more, but this time he left. The lake house saved me in small ways. Not dramatic ways. Not movie ways. It saved me by giving me things that needed care. The roof had a leak over the back hallway. The garden was full of weeds. My grandmother's old studio smelled like dust and cedar and unopened years. The windows needed sanding. The pantry needed rebuilding. The boathouse door stuck every time it rained. Pain feels endless when all you do is sit inside it. Work gave my grief edges. 3 weeks after Ethan came by, I found an old box of my grandmother's papers in the studio. Under some photographs and letters, I found a folder labeled Blue Heron Inn. Inside were sketches, receipts, and handwritten plans for a property she had once dreamed of restoring with my grandfather before he died. It was an old roadside inn near the water, 10 miles from town. The project never happened. Life got in the way, money ran out, time moved on. But the building still existed. I knew because I had driven past it 100 times. White paint peeling, porch sagging, windows boarded, a hand-painted sign hanging crooked in front. I visited it the next morning. The place looked tired but stubborn. The lake glimmered behind it. Wild flowers grew around the broken fence. The lobby windows were dirty, but even through the dust I could see the curved staircase and original tiled floor. It had bones. Beautiful bones. I stood in front of the building with my grandmother's folder under my arm and felt something shift inside me. Not healing. Not yet. But direction. That same afternoon, I called the number on the old county records and learned the property had been tied up in a long estate issue. 2 heirs wanted to sell. 1 wanted to hold. The taxes had piled up. No one had cared enough to move. For the first time in weeks, my mind came alive in the way it used to when I was building something. I started making calls. Not because I was suddenly over Ethan. Not because ambition erased heartbreak. But because I wanted a future that did not have his name in it. That matters. People think healing means becoming untouched by what happened. It does not. Sometimes healing means building something beside the wound. Something that slowly becomes larger than the damage. Mara was the first person I told. You want to buy an abandoned inn? She asked. I want to restore it. With what money? Grandma left me some. I have savings. I can take small private events again. And if I create the right proposal, I can apply for preservation grants. Mara stared at me for 2 full seconds. Then she smiled. There you are. I had not realized until then how long I had been missing from my own life. The next few months were hard in the most honest way. Not glamorous, not cinematic. I met with contractors who doubted me because I was a woman in my early 30s with a notebook, a budget, and determination in place of a powerful last name. I fought county paperwork. I begged for meetings. I learned how expensive old pipes can be. I stripped wallpaper with my own hands because I could not afford to hire for everything at once. I also took on new work. Not weddings. I could not do weddings yet, but small private dinners, retirement parties, a women's networking brunch, a local library fundraiser, a fall harvest market. Nothing big, but enough to keep money moving. At night, I worked on the Blue Heron proposal. I named the concept House of Second Beginnings. Not for romance, for life. The inn would host small retreats, community classes, local art weekends, grief circles, writing workshops, seasonal dinners, and intimate celebrations for people who wanted meaning instead of spectacle. It was not the luxury coastal hotel Ethan's family had wanted. It was better. It had soul. One afternoon, I was measuring a back room at the inn when a man's voice behind me said, "If you stand on that loose board again, you'll go through the floor." I turned so fast I almost dropped my tape measure. A man stood in the doorway carrying a toolbox. Tall, broad shoulders, faded work shirt, warm brown eyes, dark hair falling over his forehead like he had forgotten to care. He looked like the kind of person who built things slowly and correctly. He pointed to the floorboard. "That section is rotten." I stepped back at once. "Good to know." He nodded. "I'm Noah Mercer. My uncle owns the hardware store in town. Mara told him you were looking for restoration help." I blinked. "Mara did that without asking me." A small smile touched his mouth. "That sounds like something a good friend does." I tried not to smile back, but failed. Noah walked in and crouched near the board. "This place is older than it looks. That's good news and bad news." I'm getting used to that sentence. He glanced around the room, then up at me. "You really want to save it?" "Yes." "Why?" I looked past him toward the lobby windows, where lake light touched the dust like gold powder. "Because no one else did." Something in his face softened then. He stood and offered me his hand, rough and steady. "All right, let's see what can be saved." Noah did not rescue me. That is important. He did not sweep into my life as a replacement for Ethan, and I did not fall into some sudden healing fantasy because a kind man knew how to use a drill. He simply became part of the world I was rebuilding. And that mattered more. He spoke plainly. He charged fairly. He laughed rarely but sincerely. He treated my ideas like they were worth hearing. When he disagreed, he said so directly. When I had good instincts, he said that too. He saw me as capable. After betrayal, that kind of respect feels almost holy. By winter, the first floor of the inn had begun to breathe again. The front porch was stable, the original tile had been cleaned. The dining room walls were painted a soft cream. We found old beams under the damaged plaster and kept them exposed. A local ceramic artist agreed to create table pieces in exchange for hosting her spring workshop once we opened. I was tired all the time. I was happier than I had been in months, not constantly, not simply, but truly. That was when Ethan called again. I nearly did not answer, but Nina had warned me that his family's company might still try to pressure me if my preservation grant affected their own coastal expansion interest. I thought it might be about business. It was not. His voice came through soft and strained. "Hi." I leaned against a stack of paint cans. "What do you need?" There was a pause. "I heard about the inn. People in this town have phones. Congratulations." He let out a breath that might have been a laugh if either of us were different people. "I just wanted to say, it sounds like you. I didn't call for your approval. I know." "Again." "I know." I closed my eyes. "Then why did you call?" Another silence. Then he said, "Lena moved to Chicago last month." I felt nothing at first, then a cold irritation. And we're over. I said nothing. He continued, voice uneven. It should have worked. For years, I thought if I ever had the chance to be with her again, everything would make sense, but it didn't. It was all memory, all unfinished fantasy. The real relationship was not there anymore. He sounded devastated by his own discovery. I almost admired the selfishness of it. You called to tell me your romantic mistake has become clear in hindsight? I called because I was wrong. You were wrong the night you chose her. I know. No, I said sharply. You were wrong long before that. You were wrong when you asked me to marry you while part of you was still waiting for another woman. You were wrong when you let me build a future with you on top of uncertainty. You were wrong when you used my work. You were wrong when you made your confusion my public humiliation. He did not speak. Good. I needed him to hear it. When I continued, my voice was quieter. You did not break my heart in one moment, Ethan. You broke it with layers. He breathed in slowly. You're right. I looked out through the front window of the inn. Snow had started falling over the lake, soft and light. Then he said the thing I had feared he might say eventually. I miss you. A year earlier, that sentence would have wrapped itself around my whole body. Now it only made me tired. You miss the woman who loved you without making you earn it, I said. That is not the same as missing me. His voice cracked. Ava, please. I ended the call. That night, I sat alone in the unfinished dining room, wrapped in my coat, and cried again. Not because I wanted him back, because some part of me still wanted him to have been different. That part does not die quickly. Spring arrived with sawdust, grant paperwork, and tulips pushing up through thawed ground. The inn got approved for a regional preservation grant. I screamed so loudly on the phone that Mira had to hold it away from her ear. Noah brought cider to celebrate. My parents came down for the weekend and helped scrub old window frames. My father, who had not spoken Ethan's name in months, stood in the back garden and said, "Your grandmother would be proud of this." I nearly cried on the spot. The opening date was set for late May. We did not market it as a luxury place. That was the best decision I made. We marketed it as honest beauty, a retreat for people starting again. The first bookings came slowly, then all at once. A writing group from the city reserved a weekend. 2 sisters booked a small birthday dinner for their mother. A local school wanted to hold a scholarship luncheon there. A woman emailed asking if she could host a quiet ceremony after her cancer treatment ended because she wanted a place that feels alive. That line stayed with me. A place that feels alive. So many people are not looking for perfection. They are looking for somewhere their story can still fit. The week before opening, I was in the garden stringing lanterns when I saw Ethan's car at the edge of the gravel drive. For a second, I thought I had imagined it. Then he got out. I stood very still. He looked worse than before. Not dramatic, just worn down. His confidence had changed shape. The easy certainty he used to wear like a second skin was gone. Noah noticed my expression from the porch and came down the steps at once. "You okay?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Yes." "Do you want me to stay?" A strange warmth moved through me. "Yes," I said. He nodded once and stayed near the porch rail, not interfering, just present. Ethan walked closer, then stopped when he noticed Noah. His eyes flicked between us. Something tightened in his face, but he said nothing. "Good," He did not get to arrive with feelings anymore. "What are you doing here?" I asked. I know I should have called first. "You should not have come." He looked at the inn, the lanterns, the painted porch, the flower boxes, the open windows catching afternoon light. "You did all this." "Yes." "It's beautiful." I waited. Finally, he said, "I needed to see you." I almost laughed. "Why do men always need things from women they hurt?" He took the hit. "Because they are selfish." At least that part is accurate. He looked down, then back at me. "I've spent months thinking about what I did, about who I was, about how I treated you. And I know saying sorry means nothing now. I know I do not deserve another conversation, never mind another chance." I folded my arms. "Then why are you here?" His eyes were red-rimmed. "Because losing you is the clearest truth I've ever had." Noah shifted slightly on the porch, but stayed silent. Ethan went on. "I thought Lana was unfinished love, but she wasn't. She was old emotion and memory and ego. You were real. You were home. And I destroyed that because I was too weak to understand the difference. It was a good speech. That was the problem. Pain can make people eloquent." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I asked, "If Lena had stayed, would you be here?" He said nothing. That was my answer. I nodded slowly. "Exactly. Ava," no, my voice stayed calm. "You do not get to find your way back to me because your fantasy failed." His face crumpled, just a little. "I love you," he said. The old version of me would have shattered hearing that. This version only felt sadness. "Maybe you do," I said, but not in a way that protected me when it mattered. He stepped closer. "People make terrible mistakes." "Yes." "People can change." "Yes." "Then why?" "Because changed people are not always owed access to the ones they damaged." That landed between us like truth often does, quiet and impossible to move. He stared at me as if he had not expected me to become this woman. Maybe he had imagined tears. Maybe he had imagined anger. Maybe he had imagined that enough regret could reopen a closed door. But I was not a door anymore. I was a house I had rebuilt myself. I took a breath and said the kindest thing I could offer without betraying myself. "I hope you do change, Ethan. Truly. I hope you become someone who never does this to another person. But you do not get to practice that change on me." For 1 second, I thought he might cry. Instead, he just nodded once, a broken, small nod. I understand. This time, I believed he did. He looked around the inn one last time, then back at me. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know," I replied. And for the first time, I did not hate the words, because now they no longer carried hope, only ending. He left without asking again. Noah waited until the car disappeared down the road before walking over. "You okay?" he asked. I looked at the gravel drive, then at the lanterns moving gently in the wind, and I surprised myself by smiling. "Yes," I said. "I think I am." Opening day arrived bright and clear. The lake was blue glass. The inn smelled like lemon oil, fresh bread, and peonies. Music drifted softly through the dining room. Every chair was in place. Every room held light the way I had imagined it in those long winter months when nothing seemed certain. Mara came early and cried in the foyer. My mother adjusted flowers no one else would have noticed. My father stood on the front porch, pretending to inspect the railing while secretly watching guests arrive, with a look I had not seen since my college graduation. Noah fixed a stubborn gate latch 10 minutes before the first luncheon began, then refused to take credit for anything. By noon, the place was full. and not with people hungry for drama, with people ready for beauty. That difference healed something in me. The first event was the scholarship luncheon for the local school. Nothing glamorous, just teachers, families, students, simple centerpieces, warm food, and a lot of genuine joy. At one point, I stood near the kitchen door holding a clipboard, watching the room hum with life, and it hit me with such force that I had to put a hand against the wall. I had done this, not with Ethan, not in spite of pain either. Through it. There is a difference. Late that afternoon, after the last guests had left and the dishes were stacked, I went down to the lake behind the inn. The air was soft. The reeds moved quietly in the shallows. The sky was turning gold at the edges. Noah found me there a few minutes later, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed me one. "You disappeared." I needed to see it all from far away for a second. He stood beside me, shoulder almost touching mine. "What does it look like?" I smiled into the cup. "Like I survived." He was quiet for a while, then he said, "You did more than that." I looked at him. Noah had never rushed me, never leaned too close, never turned kindness into pressure. He had simply been there month after month in a way that made trust feel possible again. Not easy. Possible, that matters too. "What?" I asked softly. He looked out at the water instead of at me. "You built something people can breathe in." No one had ever described my work that way. I felt something warm and deep move through me. "Thank you," I said. He nodded, then added, almost like an afterthought, "For what it's worth, he was an idiot." I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. "There it is," I said. "The speech I've been waiting months to hear." He smiled then, fully this time, and the evening changed shape around us, not into romance, exactly, not yet. Just into hope, real hope, not borrowed from a man's promises. Hope made of steadiness, earned respect, and the quiet knowledge that my life no longer depended on whether someone chose me. I had chosen me. That was bigger. Summer made the inn famous in all the ways that actually matter. A travel writer from the city stayed for a weekend and wrote a piece calling it the most human place on the lake. A grieving widower booked a memory dinner there for his wife's birthday and sent me a letter afterward saying it was the first evening in 2 years that did not feel like survival. A group of women held a small retreat there, after all leaving jobs that had made them miserable, and one of them told me on the last day, "This place feels like proof that endings can be useful." I kept that note. I kept many notes. They reminded me that beauty is not decoration. It is mercy. By late August, I had paid off more debt than projected. The upstairs rooms were finally complete. The old greenhouse behind the inn was being restored for winter classes. Mara had started joking that if I kept growing at this pace, I would become intolerable. I told her I was already intolerable. She said, "No, now you're profitable." My family laughed more around me than they had in a long time. My mother stopped looking at me with quiet worry. My father no longer checked the driveway as if disaster might return at any moment. Even I stopped checking. That is how you know pain has loosened its grip. Not when it disappears, when it stops waiting at the door. One evening in early September, I got a letter in the mail, not a text, not an email. A letter. I recognized Ethan's handwriting immediately and almost threw it away unopened. But curiosity is a powerful weakness, so I sat at my desk and read it. It was not dramatic. That surprised me. No declarations, no desperate promises, no request to meet. Just honesty. He wrote that therapy had forced him to see how much of his life had been built around avoiding discomfort, until the avoidance itself became cruelty. He wrote that he had confused intensity with love and nostalgia with truth. He wrote that he now understood I had not just been his fiancé. I had been the person who made his life deeper, steadier, and more meaningful, and he had treated that gift with arrogance. Then he wrote something that stayed with me. "I do not expect forgiveness," he said. "I only wanted to become honest enough to say this without hoping it wins me anything." At the end, he wished me happiness and signed only his name. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it, placed it in a drawer, and went back to work. That was all. Some endings do not need fire. Sometimes they need a quiet room and a woman who no longer mistakes apology for destiny. It was almost a year after the engagement when the inn hosted the kind of event I once thought would destroy me forever. A proposal dinner. Not a wedding. Not an engagement party for me. Just a private dinner where one person planned to ask another a question that changes a life. When the booking first came in, I nearly declined it. But then I realized something important. I did not want Ethan to own that kind of joy in my mind forever. So I took the event. I designed it carefully. Candlelight on the terrace, late roses, string music, a handwritten menu, small, intimate, full of tenderness. No grand performance, no audience. When the woman said yes, she cried into her partner's shoulder and laughed at the same time. And the whole thing was so gentle and genuine that I had to step away for a minute after they left. Not because it hurt, because it didn't. I stood in the pantry, smiling to myself like a fool. Mara found me there. "You okay?" "Yes." "You're crying." "I know." "Good crying." I laughed. "Good crying." She leaned against the shelf. "You know what your problem is?" "I am sure this will be helpful. You keep surviving things and then acting shocked when you turn out stronger. I would like a less exhausting path to character growth." "That is fair." I wiped my eyes and looked at her. I thought I would never be able to do this again. Do what? Stand near someone else's happiness and not feel the old wound open. Mara smiled at me softly. "That's because the wound is not in charge anymore." She was right. Healing is not a clean line. It never had been. I still had moments. Songs I skipped, places I avoided, sudden flashes of memory that could still tighten my throat if I was tired enough. But the center of my life had changed. Ethan was no longer the main story. I was. That winter, the greenhouse opened. We filled it with long tables, dried orange garlands, clay cups, and small evergreen trees in old brass pots. We hosted letter writing nights, pottery classes, grief workshops, and a Sunday series called Begin Again, where people came to talk about careers, divorce, illness, loss, aging, motherhood, and all the invisible ways life can split and reform. The idea had come from my own wreckage. Now it belonged to everyone. At one of those evenings, after most guests had gone, an older woman stayed behind, folding napkins into neat squares. I recognized her from town, but did not know her well. Her name was Judith. She said, "Can I tell you something strange?" "Of course." "I came here the first time because I heard what happened to you." I smiled faintly. "That's not strange. Half the county heard." She laughed. "True, but that isn't the point. I came because I thought if a woman could be humiliated like that and still build something this lovely, maybe my life was not over either." I looked at her quietly. She touched the napkin in her hands. My husband left after 32 years. For a younger woman. I thought that was the end of my story. But then I came here and every room says otherwise. I could not speak for a second. Then I said, "I'm glad you came." After she left, I sat alone in the greenhouse for a long time. People talk about revenge like it is the sweetest outcome. Sometimes it is not. Sometimes the sweetest outcome is becoming a safe place for people who thought they were finished. That is a different kind of victory, a better one. In early spring, Noah asked me to dinner. Not as a contractor, not as a friend doing me a favor, not as anything unclear. Just dinner, simple, direct, respectful. We were standing in the greenhouse doorway after checking a leaking pipe. The light was low and soft. He looked nervous in a way that made him seem younger. "If you say no," he said, "I will behave like an adult and continue fixing your terrible plumbing decisions with dignity." I laughed. "My plumbing decisions? You bought a building older than common sense. That is fair." He smiled a little, then waited. There was no pressure in him, no performance, no urgency, just an open hand. I realized then that what made the moment beautiful was not that someone wanted me again. It was that I finally understood I could choose slowly. I did not have to leap because I was afraid of being alone. I did not have to cling because attention felt like safety. I could simply ask myself the honest question, do I want this? And I did. "Yes," I said. He exhaled, relieved enough to make me laugh again. "Good. Very confident opening." I panicked halfway through. I noticed. Dinner was easy. That was the miracle. Easy. We talked about books, old houses, terrible restaurant lighting, his mother's garden, my grandmother's stubbornness, the strange, emotional lives of people who save broken buildings, and the fact that Mara had probably been trying to set this up for months. When he walked me to my door, he did not kiss me. He only said, "I had a really good time." And I believed him. No games, no ghosts standing between us. Just a beginning that did not need to compete with anything dramatic. The next morning, while opening the office, I caught my reflection in the window and stopped. I looked peaceful, not perfect, not untouched, not transformed into some shining symbol of resilience, just peaceful. I had wanted revenge once in the dark moments after the engagement. I wanted Ethan to suffer exactly as I had suffered. I wanted his name to become a warning. I wanted him to watch me rise and understand what he lost until the truth burned. Maybe part of that happened. Maybe he did understand. But peace turned out to be better than revenge and harder won. A few weeks later, I saw Ethan one last time. Not because he came looking for me, not because fate arranged a dramatic confrontation. We simply crossed paths at the farmer's market in town on a Saturday morning. He was buying apples. I was choosing herbs for the inn kitchen. When we noticed each other, there was a brief pause that held none of the old violence. He looked surprised, then careful. I nodded first. "Ethan." "Ava?" He glanced at the herbs in my basket. "How's the inn?" "Busy." He smiled faintly. I'm not surprised. I hesitated, then asked, "How are you?" He considered the question before answering. "Better than I was, not better than I should have been." That was probably the most honest thing he had ever said to me. I nodded. "That sounds right." He looked at me for a moment, and I could see that he really saw me now. Not as the woman who once loved him. Not as the person he hoped might still rescue him from his own choices. Just me. Whole. separate, gone. There was grief in his face, but there was respect too. "I heard about the greenhouse," he said. "Town gossip remains efficient." "It does." He paused. "I'm glad. Truly." This time, I believed him as well. Maybe distance had finally made both of us simpler. He looked like he wanted to say more, but then his eyes shifted past me and softened slightly. I turned. Noah was walking toward us carrying 2 paper cups and a loaf of bread from the market bakery. He reached me, handed me 1 cup, then looked between Ethan and me without tension. "Morning," he said. Ethan nodded politely. "Morning." Noah's hand settled lightly at the small of my back. Not possessive, just present. I felt Ethan understand everything in that one gesture. Not that I belonged to someone else, that I had built a life where I was safe. He took a step back. "I should go." I met his eyes. "Take care, Ethan." "You too, Ava." Then he left. I watched him disappear into the crowd of people carrying flowers, fruit, children, and ordinary lives. And I felt nothing break, only a quiet closing. Noah looked down at me. "You okay?" I smiled and took the coffee from his hand. "Yes," I said, "completely." He glanced after Ethan once, then back at me. "Good." We walked on through the market, stopping for jam, fresh bread, and too many flowers I did not need but bought anyway. The sun was warm. Someone near the fountain was playing violin badly. An old couple argued cheerfully over tomato prices. A little girl spun in circles with a bunch of daisies in her fist. Life was doing what it always does, moving forward without asking whether your heart is ready. The miracle is that sometimes your heart catches up. If you had told me on the night of my engagement that the worst public humiliation of my life would lead me here, I would have hated you for saying it. Pain does not feel purposeful when you are inside it. It feels pointless, cruel, personal, and maybe some of it is. I still do not believe everything happens for a reason. Some things happen because people are selfish, because they are weak, because they want comfort more than courage, because they confuse being wanted with loving well. Ethan did, and I paid for that. But that is not the whole story, because what happened after mattered too. I left, I grieved, I lost the future I thought I had. I discovered I had given too much of my work, my trust, and my identity to someone who had not earned that kind of access. Then I did the hardest thing. I began again without waiting for the perfect emotional moment to start. I built while hurt. I worked while grieving. I chose myself before I fully believed in the life that choice would create. And little by little, that life became real. That is the part no one claps for in a dramatic video clip. Not the ring on the table, not the public speech, not the walk into the night. The real story is what comes after. The forms, the fear, the lonely mornings, the legal emails, the sanding, the invoices, the nights you cry and still get up the next day, the friends who keep showing up, the family who learns how to hold you without fixing you, the moment you notice laughter has returned without your permission, the first time a room you built fills with people who feel safe in it, the first time you hear your own name and it belongs completely to you again. That is the real story. And if the man who broke you comes back later, regret in his voice, clarity in his eyes, finally ready to say all the things he should have known before he hurt you, let him speak, let him apologize, let him change if he truly can. But do not confuse his growth with your obligation. You are not required to reopen a wound, because the person who caused it has become wiser. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to choose the life that grew after him. You are allowed to become unreachable by the version of love that once destroyed your peace. My fiancé chose his first love at our engagement. Months later, he came back begging for another chance. And by then I had already become the woman who did not need to be chosen by him to know her worth. That was the day I truly got my life back. Not the night I walked away. The day I no longer wanted to return.